Hello, my name is George Sayevich. I'm a journalist, retired from Washington, D.C. I'm also a member of the Maidan Self-Defense Unit 27, or Company 27. I am here because I really cherish my Ukrainian heritage. My parents are from here. But I was very surprised to find that there are some people here who don't have a drop of Ukrainian blood in their veins. One of these people is Bill Artrell, a retired history high school teacher from Cleveland, Ohio. We are going to tell the story of Maidan through the eyes of people who do not live here.
Hello, my name is Bill Artrell. I'm a high school history teacher from Cleveland, Ohio, USA. Most historians just get to study history from books or archival materials or even anecdotal information, but I came here to live history and experience history firsthand myself by moving to Ukraine. In Ukraine right now, of course, Russia has occupied Crimea and taken it from Ukraine. It's also invaded eastern Ukraine and the area we call the Donbass. It's a geological region there that includes the states or oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk. We don't know how the Russo-Ukrainian war will turn out. We don't know what the future is for Vladimir Putin, who has orchestrated these wars, but we do know, and I know, that one of the most important events in recent world history happened right behind me 1 year ago. It was called the Maidan Revolution, and it's Ukraine's path to freedom. This European square behind me is where it all began on November 21st, 2013. It's called Black Thursday in Ukrainian history. On that day, the president, Viktor Yanukovych. Now you need to know something about Mr. Yanukovych. He was a convicted felon. He was charged with armed robbery, convicted and imprisoned. He was not even allowed to be president. But nonetheless, part of his platform was to sign with the European Union. On one day, he made a visit to Moscow to his buddy Vladimir Putin. He did a complete about-face, and he signed with Putin an agreement to make an economic deal with Russia and betrayed his promise to go with the European Union. Of course, this incensed the Ukrainian people. They were absolutely livid. They had been lied to on something that was so vitally important to them, to move forward as a society. Therefore, 50,000 people showed up here at European Square in Kyiv, Ukraine. That's how much Ukrainians savor democracy, a country that's been denied their freedom for their entire history and been denied democracy.
Yanukovych's refusal to sign the association agreement was not the only reason for the people's displeasure. It was just the last drop that filled the cup. In the small town of Radiyivka, the policemen had raped, beaten viciously, and tried to kill a young woman who had refused their sexual advances. Reporters found out about this attack, and it was sent all over the world. Yanukovych had created an army of police in order to protect his regime. We located the person who organized this march. He is Vasyl Lyubarets, an American of Ukrainian descent from Salt Lake City. In October 2013, he had sent a letter to President Yanukovych demanding that he resign. At that time, everyone had looked on Vasyl as if he were insane. The regime, after all, was strong and cruel.
Well, the students weren't satisfied with just a demonstration because many politicians, many of whom are very, very corrupt, like Yanukovych, were trying to exploit the demonstration for their own popularity. So student activists went down the street. Right around the corner is the Maidan, the world-famous square where the revolution took place. And they had a sit-in, and they took democracy into their own hands. I was part of the student revolution in America in the 60s and early 70s, and I know what it's like to be an activist, and I know what participatory democracy is. We talked about it in Students for a Democratic Society. Well, this is participatory democracy. The students sat in at the Maidan on November 21st, 2013, starting the Euro-Maidan movement, and 3 months later, there would be a horrible massacre orchestrated by Viktor Yanukovych.
About 9 a.m. in the morning, so when we found all the people that we could who suffered from the special police department Berkut attack, they were all secure in the Hrushevsky monastery. Basically, the protest of hope turned out to the protest of parents for their children. And all the people who were coming this morning were said, our children were beaten. The protest became different, because the protest became not just for the hope, but the protest for the new system, against the system. The first was Maidan when the students were standing here. The second one was Maidan of, I would say, human dignity, because what was happened, it was absolutely, abnormal. People were standing with the banners saying, Kyiv, wake up, Kyiv, come to the square, Kyiv, protect your children.
As a historian, I know that there is no beginning point and end point for history. History is on a continuum that goes on forever. And there is an interface between the past and the present with this very church behind me. It's absolutely a gorgeous church. It's one of the most spiritual places I've ever been in my life. Well, 900 years ago, it was built by Yaroslav the Wise. Well, about 1 year ago exactly, on November 30th, students were brutally beaten by the Berkut. And they fled in here and were protected by the clergy and the priests of this church. The gates were closed, and something really extraordinary happened. The bell here rang for the first time in 800 years. It had never rung in the interim. This was extraordinary because 800 years before, Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde came through Ukraine and attacked it and laid waste to Kyiv and destroyed the entire city. So an 800-year interim existed, and then it rang again to signal that students had been brutally beaten during the Maidan Revolution in Kyiv, Ukraine.
have a story, you know. It's the first time.
This is about you, no one else. This is about the future you want for your country. This is about the future you deserve. A future in Europe.
Майбутнє Європи.
A future of peace. Good relations with all of your neighbors. The free world is with you. America is with you. I am with you. Mom.
Urging opposition protesters to come to the table for talks after the latest clashes with riot police. Long ranks of police streamed into Kiev's Independence Square earlier using chainsaws and brute force to tear down barricades. They were built by pro-Western demonstrators who'd been camped out in the square for days.
America was born in violent revolution from 1775 to 1781, led by such people as George Washington, John Adams, Ben Franklin, and Sam Adams, Thomas Paine. Well, Ukraine also was reborn as a nation just 1 year ago in January 2014 by a revolution. It started right here behind me where I'm standing. The Berkut, or the police, were attacking demonstrators violently. And remember, let's be very clear, it was the police and President Yanukovych who initiated the violence. They started the violence. The things they used from over here was something called a flash grenade. Now, in all my days of protest, I've never heard of a flash grenade, but they deliberately tried to provoke the students into violence by shooting flash grenades at them. The media here also was beaten to a pulp by the Berkut, by the Ukrainian police. There was a woman right down the street who was a reporter, and this isn't just Ukrainian media, but French media, Czechish media, and world media. Was the Ukrainian police had her on the ground, and they were stomping her and beating her to a pulp. There's one more item to the flash grenade that makes them even more pernicious and diabolical. And that is, they shoot out nails. They shoot out nails. So many of the protesters had nails shot into their stomach and other parts of their body, and even some died. Many were wounded.
I wanted to send a message to all of you brave citizens of Ukraine who are struggling to look forward and not back. We here in the United States have great affinity for those seeking democracy. We have learned through trial and error that true democracy cannot exist without a free and fair and honest election. You cannot have a democracy when you arrest and harm its peaceful protesters. You certainly cannot have a true democracy if you take political prisoners like Tymoshenko simply because you disagree with the way they want to govern. So let me just say this to all of you in the square in Kiev or all around Ukraine. When you look to the West, know that we are looking back at you with great admiration. We wish you a peaceful and safe mission. We wish you the government that you want. and we wish you the strength to carry on. Good luck.
These are pictures of the Maidan revolution of February of 2014. This shows the absolute courage of people to stand up against their government. In America, we talk about power to the people. Well, Ukrainian people took the power that is the essence of democracy and overthrew their dictatorial government of Viktor Yanukovych. But the kind of courage, the kind of fight, the kind of struggle this took is so moving, was so compelling that it changed my life. And I decided to come here to Ukraine and live and help this great cause for democracy and self-determination for a long, long suffering country.
I saw the people who had risen up against the regime, against a Moscow-backed regime. This place is Mariinsky Park, and that right there is the Parliament building, the Verkhovna Rada, Supreme Council building, which is what the official name of the Parliament is. Berkut just moved against us. It was such an aggressive rush. I was in the second line, second row then, and they just, this metal barrier that we had put up was just like nothing. And some of our guys tried to resist, those that had shields. I didn't have a shield, and I have never in my life seen such compelling, dramatic footage, more so than in any Hollywood film, blockbuster, what have you, or news clip. And it was real. These were like execution squads, and I am 100% convinced that coming here, the riot police was given direct order, kill these guys. And they did. I saw the bodies right along there, just laid out, and a lot of injured. And these titushki, these thugs, civilian thugs, walking up and down like masters of the situation. I was hurt really badly, and there was just blood covering me. So I'm standing there, and there's a Berkut guy pretty close, and I see that he's laughing. He's so happy looking at all the blood dripping from my head wounds. And so then he says, "So, you wanted your Ukraine, did you?" Not knowing he's talking to an American in Russian. And so I can't imagine why a Berkut riot policeman who gives an oath to Ukraine, the state, and promises to serve and protect the people, goes out and tries to kill them, and then says something like that. He is that the world, including the United States, don't know about Maidan, what this was, how it was really a battle of pure good against pure evil. But that just told me so much that there was a big, big hand of Russia in all this.
I want to send a message to the people of the Ukraine to let them know that I wish them all the best of luck in their peaceful struggle for democracy and freedom. Peace.
That's Hrushevsky Street, a major street. It goes by the Parliament building and the building of the Cabinet of Ministers. Well, this was the scene of huge battles between the defenders of Maidan and the Berkut riot police. And you should have seen the beautiful barricades that were put up there in order not to allow the Berkut to just overrun us. And one of the methods of keeping the Berkut away was building a wall of auto tires and setting them on fire. And so that kept the police away, but it looked like the entire capital of Ukraine and the country itself was on fire. But that was a defensive measure.
This young man here stood up for Ukrainian independence and against the dictator Viktor Yanukovych, and he was in the trade union building at the Maidan. And the Berkut, which were the riot police here in Ukraine, who were, most of whom spoke Russian with a Russian accent, which to Ukrainians made them very suspicious that they might have even been directly from Russia, set this building on fire and burned this young man to death, along with 50 others that were burned to death. Now, most Americans know about the Heavenly 100, that 100 were murdered at the Maidan in Ukraine, but there was about 50 more that were burned alive by the Ukrainian police called the Berkut, that were working, directly for the dictator Yanukovych, who was working directly for Vladimir Putin. And his body was so charred beyond recognition that they didn't even know who he was for a long time. Young man here who died in that horrific fire.
I was up till about 4 o'clock doing a translation that night, and my wife was volunteering at the medical point in the city council building. And at 6:30, she called me saying that the interior troops were storming the rest of the Maidan. Marine attaché from the United States Embassy was on the ground. And as an American, I said, I'm an American too, and he said to be careful and to watch out, and I asked him what he was doing here, and he said, this is a typical sniper ambush. He says he's seen this before in Afghanistan. He said he's seen this before in Iraq.
My name is Yanukovych. I'm a doctor from New York City, Ukrainian background, and I've been in Kyiv since November 29.
As I got to about here, I heard guys yelling for help. unfortunately put him down, and I could see he was shot in his eye, in his head. His helmet kind of fell off, and I knew immediately he was dead. But the medics still, they opened his shirt, they injected him with adrenaline, but there was really nothing you could do for the guy. People cry, or when men cry, that it's not so much that you cry because someone died, it's because when you see these manifest acts of love, because these guys died for an idea, they died for their friends who were standing with them on the Maidan.
Every citizen here is a hero. Every person that died, 112 to 15 people died here. I've seen them shot. I've been on the front lines with them. It's my duty as a Canadian, Ukrainian diaspora. My grandfather, grandmother came from this country. I've been here for 8 years. I have a lot of friends. I have family, wife, little boy. People say, what are you doing over there fighting for someone's war? They said, you have a son. I said, well, everybody else has a son here too, and daughters and family. Everybody counts here to help us struggle here. So many people have died for the freedom of this country. Today we were going to go against the Berkut and the Alpha that could be waiting in the building. Thank God they signed and act fast. Thank God that Europe and America and Canada had the courage to act fast. Dead people here. There's the funeral going on here. I have a son here, 5 years old. I want freedom for my son.
With the loss of their lives, we will build a better, freer, democratic Ukraine.
This, of course, is worth, as I said several times, worth about $1 billion of the Ukrainian taxpayers' money. But the polar opposite of this was the Maidan revolution in Kiev, where people were living in tents on the streets for months. They lived through the harsh winter months of the winter of 2013 and 14. This is how they lived, in contrast to this total exercise in self-indulgence and egocentricity by Viktor Yanukovych. Viktor Yanukovych's estate outside of Kyiv, Ukraine, and this is really an exercise in repulsion and self-indulgence. Actually, a lot of it is just utterly incongruent. It doesn't fit together. Some people call it Donetsk Rococo. Complete greed and avarice as he puts everything together, and who pays for it? The Ukrainian people. You know, all of this is beyond outrageous. It is deeply disturbing that a man would be so egocentric and self-centered to create such a room as this. This is one of the most expensive rooms in this vast mansion and estate. There's 17 different kinds of wood in this floor. It's all handmade and laid out by hand. It's tremendously expensive. Things are painted gold. I'm absolutely scandalized by this. These are gold fixtures in Yanukovych's bathroom. This is a jacuzzi. The toilets, yes, they have those nefarious gold fixtures as well. The faucets over here are gold as well. And he even has a candelabra
And it's just endless. I've been in many stately homes all over the world, in Britain, Mecking, Ludwig in Germany. This is a original painting by none other than John Lennon, leader of the Beatles, my hero. And it's ironic because he wrote the song Imagine, which calls for justice and equality throughout the world, and this man was the antithesis of justice and equality. That is Viktor Yanukovych. You can see here just one particular table worth an outrageous sum of money. He has vases that are made from marble, that are gold laden. Okay, well anyway, this shows how ludicrous this man really was. The man who fled to Russia. As President Obama said, if you want to be president of Ukraine, come back. Obviously, he's afraid to come back because of the wrath of the people. But this is about as big as his ego, and everything was just a celebration of himself. Yanukovych thinks he's one up on Abraham, making a covenant with God here. This is really irreverent, almost to use the taxpayers' money to build your own church. It's blasphemy to me. You want to dance? Yes. Yanukovych danced his way to Moscow, of course, and he also danced his way in this mansion. This apparatus here cost, guess how much? $500,000. This singular table here cost $120,000, just this table. You know, I'm a lucky man. I own a house in America that cost $190,000. This is about 2/3 of that price, just for this table. As we drive back to Kyiv from Yanukovych's mansion outside, we can see apartment complexes in the background, many of them. The 5-story ones in the background are called Hrushevsky, built during the era of Nikita Khrushchev. And people live in very tiny, humble apartments that are dilapidated, and that's how they have to live, in contrast to Yanukovych's completely egocentric self-indulgence.
On February 26, 2014, soldiers without identifying marks appeared in Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. They were soon dubbed Little Green Men. Thus began Russia's war against Ukraine. Buoyed by the successful seizure of Crimea, Russian forces moved to expand their gains in Russian-speaking East Ukraine. On 13 April, acting Ukrainian President Alexander Turchinov signed a decree launching the so-called Anti-Terrorist Operation, ATO, which marked the start of Ukrainian military resistance to the armed takeover of East Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine was liberated from Russia in 1991. Every oblast voted for independence from the Soviet Union, including the 3 breakaway oblasts of Luhansk, Donetsk, and Crimea. In fact, the vote was 92% for independence. So this country has been yearning for independence, not just for 20-some years, but for centuries.
This historic place is very important to Ukrainians. It's called Askoldova Mohila, Askold's grave. This is where an American was interred after he died August 19, 2014, in the Donbass fighting for Ukraine.
It's always been totalitarian. It's never been honest or honorable in their history. Now, this American here was killed on August 19th, shortly before the official Russian invasion of Ukraine, which Vladimir Putin denied even happened. and later he admitted that indeed it did happen. He denied that little green men had invaded Crimea in March of 2014. Later he admitted that he had even lied about that. And yet Putin and other Russian authorities, like their foreign minister, deny that Russians in fact have ever invaded Ukrainian soil, but they've been captured on Ukrainian soil. Putin has stated that he wants to destroy the Ukrainian nation.
The way to stop Putin is the old phrase of Ronald Reagan, peace through strength. We show our strength, we help our Ukrainian friends defend themselves, we move more of our NATO forces into these frontline countries, Poland, Romania, the Baltics, and others. And we make it clear to Vladimir Putin that the price he pays for aggression will be higher than any gains that he may make. And understand Vladimir Putin for what he is. He is an old KGB apparatchik that wants to, in his words, restore the Russian Empire. And he views Ukraine as the key element. After all, Russia began in Kiev.
Well, a new memorial unveiled over the weekend allows people in Washington, D.C. to remember the victims of Holodomor. The memorial is a black bronze wall depicting a field of wheat. It is intended to serve as a reminder of the 1930s man-made famine engineered by the former Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin.
In the early 1930s, Soviet Union agricultural, economic, and political policies mixed together to create a lethal cocktail called Holodomor, or genocide by starvation. Up to 10 million Ukrainians perished.
This memorial will be perpetual voice of the millions of victims of the Ukrainian genocide. And it is so important that a voice will be heard here in Washington.
Everyone knows about the Holocaust, which occurred across Europe during the 1930s and 40s, in which 6 million Jews were exterminated by the Nazis and 3 million others, including gypsies, communists, Slavs, Poles, dissidents of any kind, for a total of 9 million that were obliterated by the dastardly Nazi war machine and ideology. But how many people know about the Holodomor? The Holodomor was orchestrated by the Soviet Union against Ukraine in 1932-33. And as a history teacher, I even find it shocking because it's so minimized and even trivialized in history books as some minor occurrence in history. Yet I think the Holodomor is one of the most horrific acts in all of human history. This girl here that's obviously emaciated and terribly, terribly hungry has 5 shafts of wheat, and if you had more than 5, you would actually be murdered by the Russian government because you were so-called hoarding food. They had this negative attitude about kulaks, who were the more successful peasants, many of whom were uprooted and transported to Siberia. Remember, Joseph Stalin moved people all around the Soviet Empire. That's why there's many ethnic Russians living in eastern Ukraine in the first place. But this great starvation is the most grotesque example in human history of a deliberately engineered act of starvation against a human population. Ukrainian children like this, if they were caught picking wheat in the fields, were shot dead by the NKVD, which is the precursor to the KGB, which is the precursor to the current FSB. Of course, Vladimir Putin himself was a member of the KGB, and that's where he learned his tactics. They would come into Ukrainian houses and they would confiscate all the food. They would surround villages and force people to starve to death, these Russian agents coming into Ukraine. And they would even knock on the walls to see if there might be some food, a loaf of bread, or even some shafts of wheat that they tried to hide there in order to feed themselves at some point. Just feet away from where the Berkut ambushed the protesters in February of 2014, we are about in the western distance, about 20 yards away, is a large pit here that I want to share with you as a historian and just as a human being. In this spot right here by the October Palace, and in the October Palace as well, over to my left. Thousands and thousands of dissidents, poets, protesters, and intellectuals were murdered by Joseph Stalin and his regime in Russia. And take a look, there's no memorial here. This is normal for Ukraine. Ukraine has been oppressed and obliterated and attacked so many times that they simply can't even build enough memorials to indicate the tragedy of this nation's history. And I think that breaks my heart as much as anything else. So I pay tribute. I'll be the memorial right now for all those dissidents who perished under Joseph Stalin in the 1930s, right in this pit.
Yes, this is the shrine for those who died.
And this was just built, the shrine.
А це тільки що було збудовано?
Тільки тепер збудовано.
Only now they built it.
What does it say there?
А що там написано?
It says, "My sons, my brothers, please forgive me that I was not able to protect you from the bullets of the sniper."
Wow.
And Slava Ukraina, which means glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine.
Well, that's very amazing. Very amazing.
Надзвичайно.
The inscription was made recently.
I see.
Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine.
That's the last line of this is Slava Ukraina, which was the cry of the Maidan. So you would come out here when on the demonstration days on the Maidan.
Just amazing.
But it's all the way down the street.
All the street.
All the way down the Maidan. Thousands and thousands of people.
All these people, every one of them, gave their life for freedom. Every single one of these people here, ordinary Ukrainians. This government has an obligation to not let this fail this time. The Orange Revolution failed. What happened in the Maidan and up on this hill can't fail. They have an obligation. As the world watched, the final assault came amidst fire and ice, snipers on rooftops. The Heavenly 100 paid the ultimate price of patriots the world over. My father had an expression he repeated 1,000 times growing up. Every man and woman is entitled to be treated with dignity. Everyone. That's what your new revolution was about, dignity. There is no justification. And as Russia continues to send its thugs, its troops, its mercenaries across the border, Russian tanks and missiles still fill the Donbass. Separatist forces are organized, commanded, and directed by Moscow. By Moscow. In the 21st century, nations cannot and we cannot allow them to redraw borders by force. These are the ground rules. And if we fail to uphold them, we will rue the day. Russia has violated these ground rules and continues to violate them. Today, Russia is occupying sovereign Ukrainian territory. Let me be crystal clear. The United States does not, will not, never will recognize Russia's attempt to annex to Crimea. It's that sane, that simple.
No reason to be here. I have no Ukrainian connections whatsoever, no Ukrainian ancestry.
In fact, on one side I have English blood, on the other side I have German blood. So, in fact, I guess I have American blood. But now I do have a Ukrainian heart.